Good morning. I'm Mira Nissim. This is Montessori Essentials. Today, I am very excited to talk to Mark Wolynn, who is the leading expert in the field of inherited family trauma and has written a fabulous book that I thoroughly enjoyed. It touched my heart very much, called It Didn't Start With You, and it's how inherited family trauma shapes who we are and how to end the cycle. Emphasis on how to end the cycle, which I think is very important. And trauma has been a hot topic, I think, among humanity for a long time, but especially lately, and especially in consideration of education. So when I started to read your book, I was hooked immediately, and I'm thrilled, Mark, that you were willing to speak to me for this Montessori Essentials project.
I'm glad to be here, Mira.
Thank you so much. Turns out we have a great mutual friend, which is how I happened upon the book in the first place. And basically, I was interested both because I have early childhood trauma that I've been working on for a number of years. And I've always been really fascinated with the idea of kind of how we can create better childhoods by being more conscious adults. And I use my Montessori background to do as much as I can with positive parenting, positive discipline, peace education, giving my children Montessori education from the start, and training myself. So I've definitely gone about healing myself and making sure my children have the best start by being a very conscious parent. And so when I saw your book, I recommended it to most of my friends and have been saying, oh, guess what? Maybe that thing that's bugging you every time your child has a tantrum, it might not be your issue. It might be something else. And so it was fascinating to me to have that framework of, oh, wait, maybe it's not all my thing. Maybe there's something that keeps coming up for me that happened to an ancestor or an uncle or an aunt or my parents that I just didn't know about. Or maybe there's something in my childhood that I need to reinvestigate. And I really loved in your book that you said, as much as it could be hard for us as adults, that the connection with our own parents, whether they're alive or deceased, is really one of our big keys to kind of healing and helping the process. And I just think that would be something nice to continue to discuss and to tell people about.
So should I start with the good news or the bad news?
The good news, please.
The good news is trauma, even trauma that we're not aware of, is healable. And it can heal at any time. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the reasons I wrote the book, because many people struggle with a mystery that they can't explain,
Right.
Anxieties that strike suddenly when they reach a certain age, or depression after a certain event. Mm-hmm. So the good news is we can heal. The bad news is sometimes, no matter how amazing our parenting is, we still carry the remnants or residue of traumas that have happened in our family history.
Right.
For example, if mom or dad or grandma or grandpa experienced a difficult event, they would have a chemical change that would affect the gene expression. It's a chemical change really in the DNA.
Right.
That changes the way our genes function, sometimes for generations. And the residue of this event, the reactivity, the oversensitivity to dealing with this event as it changes our genes, as our genes express in one way or another to combat or adapt this event, that's heritable. Yeah. So no matter how great our parenting, let's say your mom was in an orphanage, or your dad was in a foster home, but you and your husband are brilliant parents and do everything by the book. Still, our children can have the feeling of, where's mom, or I can't feel her connection, which has nothing to do with you, but what you carry.
Exactly. And I have to say that during my teacher training, I started it when I already had a son who was about a year and a half. And even deciding to go into parenting, I'm thinking, okay, am I ready enough for this? Have I gone enough through my issues? Am I going to be present to be the mom I want to be? And there was like always these little triggers, and I really tried the best, but we're human. There's also this whole, the other side is the science of sleep. Being a parent, we're sleep deprived, and sometimes you have the best intention, but you just don't have the capacity as well. And I just remember feeling like, wow, this is such a bigger responsibility than I even went into, and there's so many things, especially in the first 6 or 7 years of life, where Montessori talks about the absorbent mind, like where literally children's minds are taking pictures of everything they encounter, and they don't have the filter yet. And they're just absorbing everything, how we are, what we say, how we react to situations, our tone of voice, the things that we habitually do in the house. And they're just taking it all in, and it becomes part of their personality. And when we're conscious of that, we go, oh, wait, I need to be really careful of what I'm doing with my day and the way that I speak to my husband, or, the things that I say to encourage or discourage. And I'm happy that it's all healable, because you're right, even with the best intentions, sometimes we just use that human error up to its max.
So sometimes I like to say that children express what's unresolved between the parents.
Oh, totally.
And they'll also express what's unresolved behind the parents.
Mm-hmm.
And they'll also mirror to us what we experienced, what we felt at their age, but have long ago suppressed or pushed away.
Right.
So, for example, if we had an early defense in place to not trust our mom's love, because mom took an early vacation when we were 2, and so the defense was to tighten and to push her love away, and we defended as parents and stopped feeling that. Our child then at 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 clings to us and can't let us go, saying, Mommy, Daddy, this is what you felt at this age, but you no longer remember.
Right, exactly. Yeah. And it's up to us to get to the point where we can just listen objectively and go, wait, they're not attacking me. What are they actually needing? What are they asking of me? And then
or showing me about myself that I can't see.
Definitely. Yeah. So it's
almost
been
like
fascinating.
they're little mini me's,
They are, exactly. Yeah. And it's neat to see also when they start to sound like you. A couple years in, we work so hard to get them to start speaking, and suddenly they don't stop, and oh, you sound just like me. I need to watch how I react that way. Like my little 5-year-old, he'll sometimes tell me, you need to go take a break. Go in the other room. Get out of here. I'm like, oh, sounds like me. So tell us, Mark, how did you get started on learning about this inherited family trauma? What sparked that?
For me, it was a trauma. About 28 years ago, I began to lose the vision in one of my eyes. And the way the condition, I was diagnosed with a chronic form of retinopathy. And the way the condition was progressing, the doctors told me, looks like you're going to lose the vision in both of your eyes as well. And I was panicked. Everything I tried to heal wasn't working. I did supplements and juice fasts and hands-on healing, and everything seemed to make it worse.
Yikes.
And I was panicked, and Western medicine couldn't give an answer. So I went on a journey. Literally, I gave my business away. I was a businessman at that time. I left my family, my relationship, my city, and I would follow where I thought wisdom lived. So if I read a book, I would try to find that teacher. And if I heard of a great teacher in a different country, I did that too. I mean, my search literally led me as far as Indonesia, where I'm sitting at the feet of masters and gurus and
Right. You and me
and I'm
both.
I'm looking for the answer.
Right.
And finally, one of the teachers said something fascinating to me. He said, I was waiting in line all day for a satsang,
Mm-hmm.
a personal spiritual meeting with a teacher.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And as I get to the front of the line, the guru looks right at me. I guess I should say he looks right through me. And he could see what I couldn't see, that I was broken from my parents. And
Right.
he said to me, go home and make peace with your parents. Well, I was livid because I thought, who needed my parents? I'd given them up for these
Right.
divine spiritual parents, right?
Uh-huh.
And the truth was that if we're broken from our parents, pieces of us remain broken and project that brokenness
Mm-hmm.
into our relationships and into our lives.
Oh, yeah.
So I listened, and I went back and I healed a deep break in the bond with my mom,
Mm-hmm.
which had happened in utero. It happened with the forceps at birth. It happened with the difficult labor. It
Things you
happened,
wouldn't even think that would be the issue. That's amazing.
correct, things you don't remember.
Right.
And as I healed my relationship with my mom and my dad, um, the funny thing was my eyesight returned. I didn't expect it to. I was no longer thinking, there was already at this point with all the meditation, there was an I, letter I, an I
Mm-hmm.
underneath, not the I,
Yeah.
a me underneath that was feeling good,
Mm-hmm.
regardless whether my vision was there or not. And so I no longer focused on my vision. I just focused on my healing myself.
Mm-hmm.
And and what happened is my vision returned.
Amazing.
And I said, this stuff really works.
Right?
And I began to teach the principle of how important it is to heal our broken relationships with our parents, at least at the level in inward level,
Mm-hmm.
because some people really had difficult parents, and it takes them time to make that healing happen on the outside. So I teach that we can start the inner work by number one, looking behind the parents and to see what made them shut down, what
Mm-hmm.
made them drink, what made them give us away, what
Mm-hmm.
made them critical, because those behaviors come from somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
It's only a trauma that blocks the flow of love in our
Mm-hmm.
family. Meaning, it's just a trauma that makes your mother critical, a
Right.
trauma behind her. It's just a trauma behind your dad, why he drinks to cope with his great loneliness inside, and so on and so
Exactly.
forth.
Oh, definitely. Now, one thing I would like to hear about is what happens if the parents aren't ready to go into this story with you.
They don't
We're
have
looking
to.
through our healing, but maybe they're not ready to talk
No,
about
no.
it or be
The
present. What happens then?
Yeah, it's a great question, Mira. The mistake people make is, all right, I'm going to listen to that guy and I'm going to go back and heal my relationship with my parents. And then they say, but my parents were still cold or still
Right.
depressed or still hurtful.
Mm-hmm.
We need to heal ourselves,
Right.
which is an inner movement, an inner reconciliation, regardless how our parents respond. That's not the objective. We should just expect with our parents, with all the traumas that they had, that they're still going to be the same way. The change happens in us, not in them. But when we make the mistake of, I'll change, but only if they change, we're going to wait a long time.
Exactly.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
we make the movement, and
Mm-hmm.
and with the depth of understanding that my mom can't give or my dad can't give. For example, if more love had come to my mom from her mother, who was an orphan,
Mm-hmm.
she would have loved a different way.
Right.
And if more
Exactly.
love had come to my dad from his mother, who was also lost her father at age 1 and then lost her mother too. The crazy thing is 3 of my 4 grandparents lost their mothers when they were babies.
Amazing.
And the 4th, as I was just saying, lost her father at 1, but ultimately, of course, loses her mother too, because her mother's grieving.
Right.
So this feeling of being broken from a mother's love, this, regardless how good my parents' parenting would have been, was what passed down in my family. In fact, I remember being 4, 5, 6. Every time my mom would leave the house, I would run into her room and pull open her drawers and breathe into her clothes and start crying into her scarves and her nightgowns, thinking that I would never see her again. Well, whose feeling was that really? That was each of my grandparents,
right,
who did lose their mothers and
mm-hmm.
did breathe into their mother's clothes.
Right.
And I remember sharing this with my mom. I said, Mom, when I was a little boy, I would cry into your clothes when you'd leave the house. And she looked at me and said, oh, I did that too when my mother would leave the house. And then my sister reading the book said, honey, I did that too. So the family pattern from coming from all these orphans was to feel motherless.
Right. But as a child, that's your normal, and you don't even think to verbalize it until later. So it's what would be the earliest age that a child could start working on this process? Like in the ideal utopian society where we can just bypass all the traumas and deal with it as it comes. Like
so
how early could you start?
I work with parents to work with their children. So, for example, many times a parent will have a child who's expressing or acting out in a certain way, and they want to bring the child to me and, fix my child. My child's broken. And of course, given what I said earlier, children express what's unresolved between the parents, what's unresolved behind the parents, or they mirror to the parents what the parents have long ago suppressed.
Right.
I know I need to work with the parents. So, for example, working with the child is like trying to sop up the puddle without repairing the leak.
Right. Okay.
So
it's on us.
Yeah. So I'll give you an example. Not long ago, a mother called me on the phone and said, hey, I want you to work with my 15-year-old boy who has OCD.
Mm-hmm.
And when somebody says OCD, I hear a gestalt or a complex of symptoms.
Mm-hmm.
I said, tell me what symptoms your boy's expressing. And she said, okay, he washes his hands repeatedly as though they can't get clean enough. And from my work for 25 years, I know that when somebody repeatedly washes their hands, there's a feeling in the family history that won't wash away.
Right. Yeah. I'm starting to think of some of the stories in your book when you say that.
Mostly guilt. Mm-hmm. This story is not in my book even. Mm-hmm. This is post-book.
No, but I mean the idea of it, like, I can think of what might have happened there a couple of generations back. Yeah.
So this boy, he's washing his hands repeatedly as though this feeling, guilt, cannot wash away. And I said to the mother, what else? She said, well, when he goes to the bathroom, he'll use a whole roll of toilet paper as though he can't get clean enough. And again, what won't wash away? What is it that won't wash away is my inner question. Mm-hmm. And then I said, anything else? And she said, yeah, sometimes I catch him wearing my clothes. And hold the thought for a minute that the boy's transitioning. It might be, but hold the thought. Because we can equally take on the traits of someone from the opposite sex, as well as we can take on the traits of someone who died early, or a criminal in the family, or a victim, or a perpetrator. But so she gave me 2 clues, that a feeling of guilt won't wash away, and a female in the system isn't being talked about or is excluded.
Or
So
feels dirty for some reason.
So I said to her, you and your husband come to my office. And she said, you mean my husband and I and my son? And I said, no, you and your husband come to my office. Your son is the expression through the symptoms. Some things earlier. So she comes with her husband, and they're Asian, Chinese actually. And I said, one question: who in the family felt guilty for something that happened, some harm that came to a female, for harming a female? And in one question, the husband said, that would be me. In my family, I had a sister when I was little, and we were very poor, and my parents made the decision, there was not enough food. And my parents made the decision to feed me and not feed my sister.
Oh my God.
I know.
Wow.
And my sister died.
Oh,
wow.
So
now you have
goosebumps.
I know.
Wow.
It's profound.
Yeah.
And so now we have three people who feel guilty: the father who made that decision, the mother who made that decision, and the brother who lived, which is this child's father. And the sister died. So I said to the father, do you have a picture of this sister, your son's aunt? And he said, I did save one. I was never allowed to talk about her in the family, but I did save a picture. And I said, listen, tape this picture in your son's room and tell your son every time he wants to dress in mom's clothes, he can, or he can take those clothes and give them back to his aunt, which he did. And every time the boy needed to wash his hands, to find that feeling in the body of the feeling that arises before the hand washing. What is the anxiety? What is that feeling of terror? What is that feeling of contraction in your son's body right before he washes? To teach him to find that feeling and to breathe that feeling back to his grandparents and to you, and tell you and his grandparents in his mind's eye that this feeling doesn't belong to me. It's yours, Daddy. It's yours, Grandma. It's yours, Grandpa. And the boy did this, and his OCD subsided.
Wow, that is so powerful. Amazing.
Yeah.
And when you're talking about this repetitive physical thing with the hand washing, I'm also thinking about, while reading your book, you talk about core complaints as well. Things that you keep saying and you're not even realizing that you're saying it. And once you become conscious of it, then you can travel back and figure it out. So I was reading your book and I was just thinking, okay, what is it that I do keep saying? Because I have over the years been looking into conscious speaking and law of attraction. So I always try to change those things up. But when I come back to it, there's a lot of things that we all just repeatedly say. As a parent, help me is one of them I get a lot, or, I'm not going to be able to do this, or I can't handle it, or whatever. And then if we can track it back, it's just fascinating to see kind of where that might have started. And it could be 3 generations back where, a lot of your stories are Holocaust survivors. Suddenly the family had to flee, or only half the family survived, or suddenly the one that survived feels deeply guilty that they were the ones that made it, or, they had to leave their finances and became poor for the rest, once they restarted as immigrants wherever they were. I mean, it's just amazing, these things that we don't realize that we can then work on or uncover. I know I've been kind of tracing things back, asking my parents, tell me more about, when our family was in Europe, tell me about the generation that had to flee from Hitler, and tell me more about your upbringing. And I'd always been very fascinated asking my parents how they were raised and asking them a lot of things about my early childhood, because I had memories, but they're fuzzy. and just saying, okay, what exactly happened there? Now that I have the question in mind. And it's just such interesting human condition work. It's just fascinating.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Not only when a trauma happens does it leave traces or, creates a chemical change in our DNA that
Hmm.
changes the way our genes function.
Right.
Um, not only are these traces left in the genetic imprint and the gene expression,
Hmm.
but there are traces left in our language, a breadcrumb trail, if you will,
Right.
of trauma language
Hmm.
and trauma reactions and destructive behaviors and relationship choices
Right.
and potholes that we continually step in. That when
Exactly.
we begin to observe these things, it creates its own language, what I
Hmm.
call core language,
Right.
either verbal or nonverbal.
Hmm.
And as you're saying, Mira, it leads us back to our parents' traumas or our grandparents' traumas, where it began, hence the title of the book. It didn't start with
Exactly.
you.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. So tell me, how does it work? I mean, you already talked about one family and you kind of bring them in and you talk about things with them, but when you're kind of giving this therapy, what could it look like? Do you ever use like hypnosis or regression techniques, or is it mostly kind of talking it out, or genealogy? Like, what's your system?
Mostly neuroscience. So I follow the laws of what's been revealed in the last several years about neuroscience, how the brain changes. Because when we have these traumas, we have a part of our brain that is actively active. For
Hmm.
example, the midbrain, the trauma response center, the amygdala. It's biological. It's evolutionary. Really,
Hmm.
it's
Yeah.
evolutionary. Our brain. They say 2/3 of our brain is always scanning for threats to keep us safe. So we have what's called an evolutionary negativity bias that's oriented toward remembering or focusing on what's negative to keep us safe. Well, that's great to keep us, we think, safe, but it's not keeping us safe because then we have an overactive stress response. Let's say our grandparents come from a war-torn country. Their brains, their biology, their neurology, their nervous system would adapt to function in this war-torn environment. In other words, they would develop a skill set of sharper reflexes or quicker reaction times to deal with the trauma, and they would pass this skill set forward through the gene expression. The problem is, we could inherit this great skill set if we are also born in a war-torn environment, but if we're not living in a place where it's needed, we can also inherit a stress response
Hmm.
with the dials turned up to 10. And here we are waiting for a catastrophe that
Hmm.
never arrives,
Right.
and that constant stress is damaging for the body the way it was for my vision. So what I do is I'm wondering, when I work with people, what will allow healing
Hmm.
and what will create the greatest effect. So the first thing I might do is ask someone's trauma language. Mira, tell me your worst fear. Mira, tell me your core complaint. Mira,
Hmm.
tell me, and
And
then
I'd
I'll
like to do that with you. I think I would really like to work with you on that.
be my honor to do so.
Yeah.
And then I'll do a genogram,
Hmm.
traumagram, really, a
Hmm.
traumagram of looking on both sides of the family and seeing what's been inherited. I also look at what I call the four unconscious themes, which we can get into later if we need to, of how that trauma is um, uh, glued into place, to put it in a quick way.
Hmm.
But then the way I work with people is by um, devising or having my client experience an event, a new experience really, an experience powerful enough to override the trauma response that keeps many of us stuck in that constant hamster wheel
Right.
of
Right.
suffering.
Right.
And so when we have this new experience, it can be an experience of receiving comfort or support or feeling loving kindness or an experience of generosity or compassion. Often, as you know from my book, it's a feeling of receiving comfort and support where there was none.
Right. Exactly.
And the reason I focus on these feeling states is these feeling states pull traction away from the midbrain and bring engagement to a different part of the brain, specifically the prefrontal cortex, where we can integrate this new experience and our brains can change. That's only the beginning.
Right.
Then we need to practice the new feelings and the new sensations of this new experience. Because every time we do so, we create new neural pathways. Not only that, not only do areas of our brain begin to wire together in a new way, but we also stimulate the release of feel-good neurotransmitters like dopamine, serotonin, GABA.
Mm-hmm.
And we also stimulate the release of feel-good hormones like estrogen, oxytocin. And not only that, we're now finding that by practicing something that engages the prefrontal cortex, like mindfulness, meditation, we can even change gene expression.
That's amazing.
Helping our kids.
Exactly. Which is one of the reasons why I'm very interested in Montessori education, because I feel like it would set your child up for already a peacefulness, and this it's already a positive environment, child-centered. They're not being scolded or shamed. The adult is conscious on working on themselves to make sure their reactions are appropriate. And if it's a water spill, they don't act like you've just, damaged the whole place. Oh, hey, let's get a mop. What a great appropriate response. So the child doesn't worry about making mistakes in their future. And I definitely feel like creating that environment for a child and a young adult is a great thing. I'm glad you touched on that, of that mindfulness, and it's part of the curriculum. I think a lot of schools now that are getting more conscious are starting to bring meditation and breath work into classes. And Montessori has a peace corner or a silence game. These are things that we have the children work up towards, and they often really enjoy it, and they notice in themselves that they feel more calm. Or I heard one of the teachers at my boys' school was saying that one of the children would even practice it while in line, at the end of the day where things were stressful. And he says, I'm practicing my silence game because it helps me right now, and just that
So
they become
beautiful.
conscious of that. I just love that becomes part of their upbringing as well, because there's a lot of times that trauma can be, we think of trauma of an event, but there's also trauma in the aspect of life patterns. If you're growing up in poverty, the child notices that the parents are always stressed on money. And I remember, my parents never got to the point where they were kicked out of a home, but hearing, oh goodness, I hope I make enough money by the end of the month. And children have absorbent minds. They take things literally. I used to think, oh my gosh, we're going to have to leave our house in a week, which wasn't the case, So I always felt that fight or flight. And I think there's a lot of children that feel that way. And if we can at least give them a framework of that mindfulness, they get the calming techniques until they're old enough to process these issues on a more conscious level. It's just, there's so much work to be done on this idea of trauma and lifestyle as well, of chronic stress. Definitely.
Yeah, no, your school sounds great. What a beautiful thing. One
Great
of the
curriculum.
things one of the things I send parents home with to teach their children is to find that place in the body that is reactive or distressed or unsettled, and then to feel it at the level of sensation,
Mm-hmm.
like tightening at the solar plexus, um, fluttering of the heart, and
Mm-hmm.
then to bring hand, sensation, breath, and awareness, combining those three elements. I teach that in my book,
Mm-hmm.
to that place in the body, which is, a yogic tradition for thousands of years of combining sensation, breath, and awareness, and sometimes even a sentence, as though the adult part of us is talking to the young part of us, almost in a way like, I'm here, with the hand
Mm-hmm.
on the
Mm-hmm.
body. I'm here. I've got you. I'll hold you with our hand,
Mm-hmm.
and I'll hold you with our breath, and I'll breathe with you until you feel held and safe. So sometimes I have parents teach this to their children because it's remarkably potent
Oh,
when
yeah.
children have this skill, as you're saying, as you've been saying. Yes.
Definitely. I definitely agree. We were speaking before this interview as well about other ways that you can touch the brain or affect the brain. We were talking about our common interest in aromatherapy and use of essential oils. I've been really fascinated to hear some of the research on affecting the brain through different scents, because as you know, we have memory that are held in the scent, and it works on the amygdala, which is also responsible for emotional reactions. So would you like to tell me your usage of oils and how that's helped you in some ways?
Well, I don't use oils because I don't know enough about oils
Mm-hmm.
with clients, but for myself,
For yourself, yeah.
I don't go on stage or
No, I
any.
mean personally,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's what I
Yeah,
mean.
yeah.
I don't go on stage or anywhere when I'm working without frankincense oil.
Mm,
So the sacred frankincense oil,
that's an amazing one.
I find, is my grounding, balancing oil, and I always have it on when I'm working.
Oh, that's fabulous. And
Yeah.
then you were saying that you use some
Actually, it came to me.
others.
It came to me in a dream.
Really?
I was
Oh, wow.
told in a dream that I must put frankincense oil in a geometric pattern on the soles of my feet,
Oh,
which
fascinating.
which is true. I mean, I woke up and I said, "What?" And so I tend to listen to those things,
Oh,
and
yeah.
I
Was
have a. Go
was
ahead.
that already in your vocabulary? Had you heard about
No,
frankincense
I
before? It was
never knew
new, a new
anything.
word. That's amazing.
No, I
Hmm.
never. This has been for about 25 years,
Wow.
20 years.
Huh.
I've been using this oil before I knew anything about essential oils. And I've been using it for that long. And
Mhm.
then all the research has been coming up about oils, which is profound.
So
But
profound.
personally, that's what I use.
Yeah. When I first started reading your book, I had just bought a bottle of something called Trauma Life, which Young Living Essential Oils makes. And I thought, oh, I should send you a bottle of that. But it sounds like you already know about the oils. It's pretty interesting. It's blends that are created to work on the brain to elicit responses of
Yeah,
kind of relaxing that trauma, relaxing
yeah,
that.
and it's been well studied.
Yes, it's
Yeah,
amazing stuff. There's a Dr. Ollie. I don't know what his last name, but he goes by Dr. Ollie. He talks a lot about brain research, and he's put these things on the head, and
yeah,
it shows up on the screen when he smells peppermint, what area of the brain it affects, and
yeah. I have
they're
some
getting more and
colleagues.
more.
I have some colleagues that are doing research like that in Canada.
So interesting.
Yeah,
I was thinking it would be so neat to do something where you work on this, but you use the essential oils to kind of lock it in, because I know as well with this using essential oils, you can kind of trigger a calm response, or deep thinking, or more feeling of love. And then when you're already doing something in a therapy, you can just kind of tie it in all together, so that when you're working on something and you smell the oil, later when you just smell the oil, it puts you back in that place where you go back into the thought process.
well, I can see you combining the trauma work, the parenting work you do, and the oils all together would be quite a profound step.
Definitely. Yeah. Got to do some work on it, but it's one of my goals to come up with some kind of workshop where we can say, okay, we're all parents. We decided to be parents. Here's some stumbling blocks from the past you might not know about. Let's work on that. Now let's kind of reset, and then this is what children need, and this is how to see the need and meet the need. I think it's just so important as our world changes, technology changes, that we still need to remember to go back to the roots. And like you're saying, kind of the more we get advanced on Western science, the more we realize, oh wait, that ancient meditation thing is really what we need to go for. Or, finding out about our ancestors and just asking questions. I'm curious if it's been in the States much. About 15 years ago, I was living in Europe, and I heard a researcher starting to present his work. He had been working with cancer patients in France, and he had started to heal them by looking into family traumas that were inherited. And when I started to read your book, I thought, oh my gosh, I've heard this somewhere before, and I haven't been able to track down the doctor or the researcher's name.
Claude Sabat, I think his name is.
Okay. Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
I figured you would know. And it's just this idea
this idea of looking at it, I mentioned about a psychiatrist in my book in the 1920s, Leopold Zondi, Hungary, that was looking at inherited trauma. It's not
right. It's not new to know that patterns come. Yeah.
Yeah. And then my great teacher, Bert Hellinger, who's brought so much healing onto the planet through following this work. Really, I know that I'm keeping in mind that, you're a teacher and you present a curriculum. And I just want to say that, when parents always ask me, what can I do to help my children? And I always like to say that if you or one of your kids is struggling in some way with anxiety, depression, OCD, phobias, fears, shake the family tree. I know that sounds kind of funny, but shake the family tree and see what falls out. What family secrets are hidden? What stories didn't get told? What traumas have never healed all the way? It's important to know these things, especially if we or our children are struggling. I found that if we ignore the past, it can come back to haunt us.
Right.
But if we explore it, we don't have to repeat it. We can break these destructive patterns.
Right. Which is the goal. It's, also that it's also that idea of reincarnation and karma. It's like we keep coming back because we keep stepping in it again and again in the same way. It's like, okay, I'm going to present it again. Here's another relationship. Work on it,
Well, another way we can break the cycle is to talk about the traumas in our family.
Right.
And to tell our kids what happened. Even if our kids are little, we could present it in such a sweet way with crayons, coloring. I used to have a sister. She died young. I love her very much. Let's draw her picture, or let's write her a lovely message. Your daddy's sister, I never got to meet you. I love you. We can talk about the traumas in our family, and we as the parents must work through them. So we don't leave anything unfinished for our children to resolve. The more we know about these traumas, the more we talk about them, the more we bring relief to our children, even our children that are 20, 30, 40, that are struggling with pieces that they have no clue as to why they're struggling.
Right.
So it's important for parents to open up. Then, I guess lastly, I always tell parents to create experiences, positive experiences that help the brain change itself. pull trauma, to pull traction away from the midbrain and bring engagement to other areas of brain with these feeling states like compassion, support, comfort, to teach our kids mindfulness, to teach our kids body-centered practices where they can go in and find the feeling and bring calm and breath to those areas.
It's all good stuff. I love what you said about, writing the note and the crayons and talking about the past in kind of a child-friendly way.
Yes.
I think that's what a lot of adults struggle with. It's like, I want to tell them about these things, or I want to work on this issue, but we don't know how. And so what happens a lot is we don't know how to present it to a child. So we just don't present it. And then that's what you're talking about. Later on, we go, well, there was this feeling that came up that nobody talked about. What was that again?
Exactly.
What would you say, like, what advice would you give to parents on, I don't know, like, how early would you start talking about something that happened before they were born, for instance?
In a child-friendly way, with pictures and feelings of love. Oh, this is my mom. She died early. I never knew her, but she's so special to me.
Right.
Let's light a candle, and a child-friendly candle. Let's
right, of course.
A candle in a particular, on this night, or and just send her love. And sometimes what I tell adopted or parents who adopt children is on Sunday night, set the table with 2 extra plates for the biological parents and say, these 2 plates here are for your mommy and your daddy who gave you life. We give you food and everything you need, but we want to honor your mommy and your daddy who gave birth to you. So every Sunday they join our table.
That's
there's
awesome.
there's so many things we can do, Mira, that bring everybody. The bottom line is this: whenever someone or something is excluded, it creates a fertile ground for repetition,
right?
Reliving.
Definitely.
So the idea is nobody gets to be excluded. Not your father, not your former, for example, sometimes there's a belief that I don't like this child's father, so I'll just get a new guy and that'll be the father. And that is a nightmare for children.
Yeah.
So no one can be excluded. Not former partners, not fathers, not dead parents, dead siblings. Everybody belongs. And the more we belong and have a place in the heart of our family, the less likely children are to relive the symptoms of trauma.
Wow. So the more conscious we become as parents, the more we realize there's no taboo subjects. We've got to accept that life has happened and, find a place for it. I think that's such a great response. Tell me, when a trauma happens in a family's life and it affects a child, would you do that same approach directly after, like in the cases of divorce, or if a child is in a foster home, or if an abuse happens? If the parents, of course, can be conscious and present and caring enough to deal with it, would you kind of go about the same approach of, this thing happened, let's talk about it, let's make peace with it?
I work with the parents to help the children.
Right.
So it's important that the parents make peace with each other. That's the first thing. And it's important that the parents make peace with their parents, at least inwardly, because when we're broken with our parents, we project that onto our partner. So it's important, again, that no one's excluded. And I work with parents to help their children. And then I'll say, go home and tell your children this or this.
Right.
There's a great blog on my website called A Worried Mother's Guide to helping her troubled son.
Oh, that's great.
A worried mother's
Word.
guide to
Uh-huh.
helping her troubled son, but it can be helping her troubled daughter too.
Of course. Of
And
course.
it's worth a read, and it's what the parents do with the children that is effective. I think they're the best therapists for the child.
Oh, definitely. Definitely. Tell me, we're talking a lot about inherited traumas, but in the last 20 years, there's been, in America especially, a lot of traumas like shootings at school, children acting out, getting violent. I mean, it's happening almost every week, it seems like. And finally, I've seen recently where children were organizing walkouts, and the children are having to shake the adults and say, hey, you know what? This keeps happening again.
Beautiful,
Pay attention to me. And I'm so touched that they're getting organized to say something. And I really hope that people listen and say, you know, we need to put money aside, put our interests aside, and address that children.
How brave and courageous
So
are these
courageous.
children.
Amazing.
And how lovely they are.
Definitely.
To be able to wake, as you said, to wake the parents up and say, enough is enough.
Yeah.
And yes, as we're talking in the sense of inherited trauma, a school or collective trauma or cultural trauma, like what happened to the Native Americans in our country and in Canada, with residential schools, and the Holocaust and slavery.
And what's happening in Syria right now that almost nobody ever talks about, but it's been happening for a decade. Yeah.
All of this is going to create a lot of work in the subsequent generations unless we, the parents, we, the traumatized, heal our traumas and include everybody that's been left out, including the perpetrators.
Yeah.
Which is interesting, right? How if we don't include even those who hurt us in our own inner work, then our children can identify with the perpetrators who've been left out. It's amazing. But everyone must be included. And when it's almost as though that we can look at a collective gravestone where the dead on both sides are buried. And we can each bow our heads to this gravestone and say, you hurt, I hurt, we hurt. Enough is enough.
Right.
Let's work together so our kids can be strong and well.
I so agree with you. And we definitely have to make a place for that pain, because people often, they hide to cry, they hide to be upset. We need to make it okay to grieve and share that you're going through something. I think that's another whole work to start on. It's like, we're all dealing
it's being
with
done.
Issues. Yeah.
In my community, a lot of people who do this, one of the tools I use, one of them is family constellations.
Right.
And they do family constellation work in the prisons. And they do it with the Israelis and the Palestinians. And they do it with the Nazis and the Jews. And they do it, this work is being done all over the world.
That's amazing.
So,
can you explain how that works, the family constellation therapy? I've heard a bit about it. I'm not quite sure the dynamics.
Yeah, a family constellation is a reflection of an inner image that we carry that is actually done in a group with live people. And this inner image is reflected on the outer floor. And then for the healing process, people step into roles as your mother, your father, your dead grandmother, your dead brother. And there's an exchange of dialogue and healing sentences and movements and body-centered releases. Your family doesn't even need to be there, just you.
Amazing.
Just you.
And how do you elicit that from a person? Does it just kind of come out, or?
Well, as a facilitator, been doing this many years, I've got a good read on what the trauma is and what needs to heal, and maybe even what sentences would be the most potent, and the most movements would be the most potent in healing this trauma. So I do this in cities. I come to the cities I enjoy nowadays.
Right.
I used to do it all over the world, but as we talked about, I get to pick the cities now. So I go to Sydney, Australia, and San Francisco, where I live, and Vancouver Island, Victoria. Maui would be nice. Feel free to invite me.
Oh, you're invited. Please come. Just let me know what you need.
Yeah. So I go to places now because I get asked to go to so many places, and I can't say yes. I mostly have to say no.
Right.
But I put it all in my book. That was the point.
Right.
I wrote this book for the airport reader. I wrote this book for somebody who knows nothing about family constellations, nothing about inherited trauma, just for someone who's struggling with anxiety or depression or fears or a mystery that they can't explain, symptoms, physical symptoms. And it's all in my book, which recently won the Nautilus Award for Psychology.
Congratulations.
I know.
I was about to say, well, you get invited all over the world when you win an award like that, of course.
Yeah.
Come. And you also write for a psychology publication, is that right?
I've written for Psychology Today. I've written for mariaschreiber.com, for Psych Central, for a lot, Elephant Journal, Mind Body Green. I write for a lot of publications. And I still do occasional individual one-on-one clients. I have a little bit of a waiting list, but I still do it.
Yeah. And then your institute, the Family Constellation Institute, is that where people are coming for that constellation therapy, you're saying?
Yeah.
And is it like a weekly meetup?
Yeah.
Or?
It's a weekend. So for example, May 19th and 20th, I'll have a big family constellation workshop in Mill Valley above San Francisco. And June, I think, I don't know, early June, June 2nd and 3rd, I think I'll be in Victoria.
Nice.
And April, I'll be at the New York Open Center.
Oh, fabulous.
And then I'll be at Omega Institute in August, and I'll be in July, I'll be at Multiversity 1440. Just places like that.
You've got a busy travel schedule. That's
a little bit.
When you've got to heal the planet, you've got to move around. That's fabulous. And tell me, for those of us that maybe can't travel so easily, like myself, I have 3 children. I'm in the middle of the ocean over here. You also have an online format for helping.
I do. I do individual sessions, and I also do online mentoring. So people who want to learn about my work can join my own. It's only 1 3-hour night a month for 4 months.
That's wonderful.
And they can join the class live, or they can buy the recordings, which are phenomenal. So
they don't have to start right in at the first date because there's the recordings.
Oh yeah.
But when the people are live, are you also taking live questions? And,
yeah, live questions, doing live genograms, helping them help their clients.
Right. I told you I had planned to do that one starting January, but I'll have to wait till the next cycle. I think it's fabulous. I wonder what wonderful work, what a great way to share and heal. And there's a lot of healing to be done across this planet. And the more we can all be conscious of our present, we can have a much better future. So I'm working with the little ones and hoping to, I'm working with the big ones. Yeah.
The big ones to help the little ones.
Definitely. But I really, I aim a lot to do a lot of parent outreach and parent education as well, because what I've found is even when parents make a beautiful choice, like using Montessori education for their children, and there's a lot of other types of education that are really nice and focused in this way too, positive and mindfulness and hands-on learning, which I'm really happy to see coming out. There's a lot more schools that are realizing that that's what is helpful for children than not. And I'm really hoping we'll get this paradigm shift that we can start to heal our public school system, getting away from testing and kind of giving children only blocks of learning and only one size fits all. I think they're starting to come around, but we've got to go both ways. Create the good raising child environment, good education environment, and helping the adults to connect more with themselves and the children. So we're all doing our part here. And I thank you so much for doing so much. It's just beautiful. The book is on Amazon. I just checked. It's on all formats: Kindle, paperback, hardback, and audio, which is one of my favorites, especially as a busy mom. Can fold your laundry and find out about family trauma and start to think about it. And I think it's really nice also are you the one that's narrating it?
Yes.
Yeah. So to hear your voice and also to kind of get that with the feeling and the perspective and the tone. So your book is widely available. It sounds like you're all over the world and online.
I think it's in about 16 different languages.
Oh, that's amazing. Wow. What a pleasure. That's great. So I'm very honored that you took the time to speak to me, and
it was lovely.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, it was so nice to talk to you, Mira.
So
really
nice.
Enjoyed it.
Great. And I hope to meet you the next time I'm in San Francisco area, Bay Area.